All right. So today we've got Matt Tillman in town, co-founder, CEO of Haven. Matt is based all around the world, but just flew in from Silicon Valley yesterday, and has an office here, has an office in Switzerland as well. But he's here a lot. He's here frequently, and agreed to come in and chat with us. In my introduction to Matt here, I just had a couple interesting things I'd like to share, because I think Haven, I assume most of us are not on the platform using it as users. Matt, however, in his space is completely disrupting how people move goods around the world. 6 of the top 10 trading firms in the world use Haven to ship freight. Haven has $3 billion in annual cargo value, which is roughly, you said, 3% of Amazon?
Yeah, so it's about, $3 billion. Amazon does $103-ish billion a year in cargo value.
Okay, so that's a good number. 1,000% growth over the last year, right? So you're coming out of an exhausting time period. Okay.
Let's just take a nap together this evening.
And one of Haven's customers represents 20% of all the metal that you have touched. Is that in people's lives, or is that
literally
just
all
on a
the metal.
day-to-day basis? Any metal that you touch, 20% of that? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Another customer, I think, is roughly around 30% of the food that you eat, irrespective of how local and organic 30% it is.
30% of the food that okay.
Yeah,
wow.
That's right.
Wow. So it gives you an idea of the scope. Let's start off and welcome Matt and ask him right off the bat. Matt, can you just kind of walk us through the problem that you're solving, and what your solution is, and kind of give us some context here?
Yeah. First of all, thanks for having me, and it's amazing to see this many people in the same room that want to hear anything about logistics, which was not super sexy until very recently, so I'm excited to see it. So if you're a large commodity trader, the highest variable cost that you have is freight and logistics, right? If you're going to ship palm oil or rubber or cotton or sugar or anything else that you ship out of Singapore here, your variable cost of freight and logistics represents your differentiator. And so the way that Haven helps these commodity traders is that we've built technology to help them fix that freight cost and then automate the negotiation, booking, shipping, tracking, and payments, and everything that comes along with payments downstream across any provider in the world on any trade lane, with the exception of Iran, because I am a U.S. citizen, so I just want to make that clear now that I'm on camera here. And so that's really the focus of Haven, and we charge on a per container basis. I know everybody usually asks that question, but we charge on a per container basis shipped through our platform.
And you said that a lot of the companies coming onto the platform, this is also some of the first time that they're coming off of paper and Rolodexes. This is the first time that anybody's really even spoke to them or brought them onto something like this, right?
It's interesting, right? You think anecdotally this is an old industry that hasn't been touched a lot by technology, and lately there's a lot of new kind of forwarders that are coming into the space, a lot of middlemen, a lot of brokers that are technology enabled, so they're better looking forms online, they're more technically enabled customer experience services. And then you look at the fact that many of our customers, Haven represents their only online presence. Like everybody in this room probably has a LinkedIn account or a GitHub account or something relevant to your particular part in the space, but many of our customers have no online presence outside of maybe a WhatsApp or a WeChat login. And so that's been really interesting to go in and show them the types of things that they can do with new technology.
So I want to dig into that a little bit later and how you got these guys on board in the first place. But before that, I was thinking on my kind of to-do list to get out of the way is the funding piece, right? So I think everybody's interested to hear $14 million over the last 18 months. You've raised it across countries. You've raised here. You've raised in the U.S. Maybe you could kind of give us an idea. You told me earlier, you said it's meaningless as a signal of success, but it's still obviously meaningful for a lot of us here. So
yeah,
how did you do that?
Everybody should always try and raise money. It's a lot of fun. So we I complain all the time about it, but I think our A round was closed in something like 45 days. So take it with a grain of salt. The reality of fundraising is a lot of times, we were talking earlier about just a lot of people think that that's kind of some sort of metric of success, and really the metric of success is if you can quickly process that capital and turn it into new, better, and more improved metrics that you've agreed upon with your investor. So, we got somebody in the audience from Uber, right? They're very famously raising money every 6 to 9 months, and it's become a corp dev practice at Uber. And if you look at startups generally, it's not really exciting that they've raised billions of dollars. It's exciting they've been able to quickly process billions of dollars and convert it into growth. And so for Haven, people are like, "Oh man, congrats on the raise. That's phenomenal." I'm like, "Yeah, I wish I didn't have to take any money at all ever. I wish we could just grow massively and never take any money." But yeah, so we've raised, I think officially, I can't remember externally what's been said. I think it's 14.8 or something like that. So that's been over the course of 18 months.
And so, you're raising not just in one location either. You're involved with investors here in Asia, in the U.S. What was that like? Kind of different investor mentalities, or was it all, everybody kind of work together as a team, or
what is it?
Are you balancing all these plates at one time?
Yeah, it's like masochism, I think, when you do it to yourself. I think that's basically how that works. I was like, okay, well, let's make it as complicated as possible. Let's raise money in the U.S. and then in Asia, and get the Europeans to kind of help us make the market, which is always fun. So basically, the way that it works, it's very, very simply, is that if you have a massive idea and you have some growth, some traction, and you've got a good team, and the team is a really important component because they're the people that are going to be responsible for processing the capital. So if you don't have a team in place, or at least the people that are capable of processing capital, don't raise money because it's going to suffocate your entire business. So we had great people in place in Asia and in the U.S. as well when we did our last round. And we knew that Europe, in particular Switzerland, was a really important market for us for commodity trading shops. And so, we raised in each one of these locations. The other thing that we did is we had this weird requirement where I require that I meet an LP from every fund that makes an investment in Haven. And this is the really important thing. If I don't know who in here is like a junior entrepreneur or a senior entrepreneur that wants to raise more money. But basically, if you raise from an investor or a VC is a combination of salesperson and business analyst. And that's a really important thing to understand because they have a two-sided market that they're making. They're brokering a trade, and you are the trade that they're brokering. So they have LPs, and their LPs have different interests, just like each one of us does. And so it's really important that you understand who you're going to have presenting on your behalf, but then also who they're going to be presenting to. And I think that's a really important component that gets lost a lot of times, especially in Asia, where you maybe don't have as much liquidity on the VC side or as much opportunity or demand on the VC side. Any
difference in mentality, the different investors based on region, so Singapore versus Silicon Valley, for example?
Yeah, this is kind of one of those things. So in Silicon Valley, and in U.S. investing generally, there's been such a great tradition of massive high growth companies. So you've got, you do have Uber, but you have, before that, even if you think back in the 90s, you had Yahoo and eBay and these massive scale companies, Google as well. And so investors have maybe not just a higher appetite for risk, but they have a higher ability, they have a better ability to sell to their LPs that risk than you do in Asia. In Asia, it's a lot of family funds that are backing the VC funds, and so it's a little bit harder for those VCs to convince their LPs, which are family funds, but maybe more traditional family funds, especially in Singapore, that maybe don't have that appetite for risk or for large scale risk. So that's one of the things. And then in Europe, if you have a European investor on your cap table, then it's going to be potentially pretty tough for you. Because they don't always play nice with others, and they're very, very by the books. So I think those are pretty tricky. But also the dynamics in Europe are different from an employment perspective too, because the investor is going to invest in a team, and that team's going to have to hire people. And in Europe, you can't really fire people, which is horrible. It's like my least favorite thing about Europe. Is that the thing is about a startup is you have to grow fast, and you have to make a lot of really tough decisions very quickly. And that's usually hire fire decisions if you're the CEO. That's basically your only lever. And so in Europe, it's just damn near impossible.
Well, let's get into hiring then, because you've got teams, you've got 28 employees across 3 different offices, not just 3 different offices, but 3 different countries with completely different employment laws, right? Singapore, Silicon Valley, and where is it in Switzerland?
It's in Basel.
Okay.
I think officially in Zug, and then Basel is the operating.
So I mean, how do you handle that then? Is it you're building teams and hiring across these different locations?
As I'm hearing this said back to me, don't do anything that I'm doing ever. This is like this is a horrible decision. I don't know what we were thinking.
That's what this is all about.
Yeah, exactly. So don't do any of this. So we started in Singapore actually. And Singapore, because it's a massive shipping hub, and it's also a big commodity trading hub because there's a lot of tax efficiency here. And so we knew we wanted to be able to walk into a couple of buildings and basically do field sales instead of, because you're not going to do inside sales with commodity trading firms. They're not going to pick up a call. So so that was one big thing. And then in the U.S., we pretty much just have it as an R&D facility, and it hasn't been a big trade for us until recently. And hiring is really difficult as a startup just in a single location, let alone in 3 locations. And the way that we've kind of done this is we paid more upfront for more senior people that we trusted to hire great people. And if you look at it culturally, it really worked for us here in Singapore so far. Switzerland still, it's new, right? It's a very new office since June, I guess, officially. But in Singapore, we've got an awesome team that was hired because we trusted the people on the ground to really hire and build up the office. A woman named Fawn that runs the office here is just fantastic, and I think our second or third employee, something like that. So, so you really do have to trust the people on the ground to do a great job.
So on trusting people and kind of building the team, you still focus nearly how much of your time on hiring? It's quite a lot of time, right, on interviewing and hiring people.
Yeah, if you find product market fit and you've got a product that people seem to care about and they're buying, they're repeat buying, basically as a startup CEO, you have 3 jobs. The first is setting vision, strategy for the company, just long-term vision, giving everybody their North Star. The second is raising capital, but more generally managing the board. And the third is recruiting. You are the lead recruiter for the company. I would rather sit down with any one of you and talk about things that you could potentially do to help Haven than almost anything else. It's the most important aspect of my job, and that's because we were talking about this earlier. Mm-hmm. The biggest thing you have to do is if you're still doing some task that you think someone else is better for, you haven't done your job as a startup CEO. Your goal is to fire yourself as fast and as frequently as possible from all these positions, and that's especially important when you're talking about country expansion. Mm-hmm. So that's a big tenet at Haven. And also our managers at Haven, you're told in the interview, you're told that you're measured on 2 things. 1, you hit your numbers. If you're in the sales or operations side, you hit your KPIs. And 2, and probably more importantly, you're in the people business, and your job is to hire someone vastly superior to you day one. That's your job. So recruiting is the thing at Haven.
And you mentioned interestingly that you don't have a lot of challenges hiring in Silicon Valley, even though everybody's talking about it's really, really difficult, can't find people. But you said for you guys, the pipeline is good, right?
Now that I know this is recorded, my head of talent is probably she's upset
she's
right now.
It's really hard.
It's really hard. I think to hire great people is always a challenge, and you want it to be a challenge. But we have maybe less of an issue than a lot of firms in Silicon Valley. But I don't think that's because we're so much greater or anything like that. I think right now you've got an opportunity where a lot of the companies that were really like these unicorns were funded 2.5 to 3 years ago. And so it's just about exit time on diminishing value on those options. And so they're starting to look around. And so we're getting inbound because of that. The other piece is we work in a really physical space. If you work at Haven, you're legitimately helping someone get their food. And that's a very interesting thing, right? When you're building technology to help that happen. And so I think we get a lot of inbound because of that.
When you had said from a competition standpoint and your competitive landscape, you said the number one thing that you compete with companies in your space is on talent. So you're actually fighting for talent, right?
Yeah, I think we've got a couple of well-funded companies in this space, and with very different business models, but it all starts to look a bit like a broker at the end of the day. And so Haven stayed very true to its principles that we don't broker freight ever. We're not a forwarder. We're not a middleman. All we do is help customers trade smarter and better and faster. And so I think that's number one. You have to be really committed to that, especially during the interview process as a big pitch. The other thing is when you're competing, when you're building something new from scratch, you want competition to know that there's competition out there. So you want product competition. You kind of want to be really paranoid and just assume everyone's your competitor. I know I'm paranoid about everything. I'm always worried about everybody in our space, irrespective of whether or not they're actually a competitor. But the bigger thing that I want to compete with them on is I want to get better talent. And so far as a company, as I can tell, we have better talent than anybody else in our space, and that's the thing that we actually
have you gone head to head at all? Have you had to?
Yeah, I think actually my old CEO at Adchemy used to have this really great phrase. Murthy Nukul is his name, and he's an investor in this company. He said if you win the 50-50 jump balls when it comes to recruiting, it's like you versus your competitor. If you win more of those than they do, then you're gonna win, right? That's how you win a market, and I'm a big believer in that. So we have had several people that have interviewed at other companies in our space, and I think 100% of the time they've come to work at Haven.
Really?
Yep.
Any interesting battles there, or is it just kind of a simple thing of they're interviewing at all these companies and you ended up having the best offer?
Yeah, I forgot that we talked about this a little bit. So this is kind of a delicate one. Yeah, so we have, so first of all, as a company, we're 50-50 male-female, and it's really rare for tech companies to be like that. And so that creates a much more interesting culture, I promise you, than the Silicon Valley bro culture that exists, which is pretty despicable and very non-technical. So I have no love for it. And so when you get an opportunity to bring someone in, they can see that, and they see your attitude from day one. It's a really important thing that you convey that you want to build kind of a truly great company culture. And if you do that, I think you're going to be always a little bit ahead of your competitor in that recruiting process.
So you focus on culture in the interviews?
Right away. Yeah. I mean, right away, I'm very explicit about, everything. But I think with regards to that particular piece, we have had one of the competitors in the space has lost a candidate to us and gone to great lengths to trash this particular candidate, even though she did a number of very nice things for them by declining, but also like gave them customer business and things like that. So she was very kind about it. But still, they trashed her in market and basically trolled her with banks. And so that kind of thing happens, and it's really unfortunate. And so I'm highly protective of it and very aware of it. Yeah.
So maybe practically as well in terms of culture, and how do you make your culture evident, right up front when you start talking to a candidate, whether it's on the phone or in an email? Is it core values? I think telling a candidate what you don't do immediately within the first 15 minutes is a really important thing. Like, give the whole startup pitch, like we're changing the planet for X, Y, and Z, and like all that stuff that everybody gives, which is great, and it's really important that they get an understanding of how you believe in things. But I think the thing that's also really important is by saying, as an example with our account executives. So we have an account executive position open on the website and an ADR position open on the website, and I can just tell you what those salaries are right here because we are so completely transparent as a company. So ADR is 65K base US, AE 80K, 90K, and 100. 80K if you're a freight forwarder person, 90, which we don't really hire very many of, 90K if you've come from the commodities trading background, and 100K if you've got a software trading background, and then variable comp is above that. And it's the exact same across everyone in the company, irrespective of when you joined. And so there's no negotiating. We do not negotiate, and I will tell candidates up front that we don't negotiate, and that's because we don't want to incentivize slicker salespeople from getting more money than someone that is uncomfortable about negotiating for salary. So we pay everybody the exact same amount within their class, within their band. And you said that's also about that. They get a feeling for the culture on that first call when you're that transparent and you're that open and direct. Yeah. And the right people appreciate that, or
yeah, that's right. I mean, people that say, "Oh, well, I don't know," and like kind of haggle for it. I'm like, "Great, you're not going to work out here. You're not going to like this. So you should go somewhere else." And
interesting.
I will encourage that.
So let's we're going to get to questions probably in the next 5 to 10 minutes. That's kind of one of the fun parts of this format as well, is throwing at Matt whatever question you want. No holds barred. Maybe we rewind a bit. So now you're hiring salespeople. You got your account executives, right? You're scaling out. But in the early days, what always interests me is how the things that you had to do as a founder to get people onto the platform in the first place. And because these are folks that you said you had to go knock on doors, but you're knocking on doors in places like China and Singapore, right? So it's not just all in your local neighborhood, right? So
no, it's like, and also I'm like happy startup product guy, showing up at like a 150-year-old shipping company run by a bunch of interesting characters. And I had one moment actually where I showed up in Geneva, Switzerland, just me. I was looking to do a deal with one of the shipping lines that's there, and I showed up and I had an idea. I had a pitch basically at that point, and I was sitting in the lobby. The guy comes out, this older gentleman who's quite famous in the industry as being quite the character. He comes out, looks at me, and looks around. I thought there'd be more of you. All right, come this way. And I was like, oh, this is going to go great. This is just going to be a really fun meeting. Takes me downstairs into like the basement, this like slate black basement hallway. And I'm like, oh my God, it's like Darth Vader. I'm doing a deal with Darth Vader. This is like super weird. And so we go past his like team of baristas and then into the soundproof vestibule, into the soundproof room. And it occurred to me that, oh, right, the shipping industry has a lot of collusion problems. So maybe I should just like tread lightly on this conversation. And so I'm sitting there and he just, he leaves the room, comes back in the room, leaves the room. He's not happy that somebody duped him into having this meeting. And I'm just like thrilled about this whole situation. And he starts yelling at me for 45 minutes about why I'm crazy, why this idea will never work. It'll never take off. You'll never be any good at this. 45 minutes of just berating me. I just met the guy, just berating me and personally attacking. And so much so that towards the end, he starts apologizing for how much he's berating me. And the whole time, I'm like a product guy, so I'm an engineer, right? So I'm just sitting there taking all these notes. I'm like, oh my God, this guy's incredible. He knows so much about the industry.
Great feedback.
Yeah, I know. It's like amazing feedback. And it's like, you want hatred or you want love, like in between and indifference is completely useless as an emotion. So I'm taking all these notes and we get to the end, and he's apologizing. I'm like, oh wow, this is so great, thank you so much. And he's like, what? I was like, yeah, I got a question. If we can we list 50 to 60 of your containers and sell them on a weekly basis? And he's like, yes, of course, everybody will do that. I was like, okay, great, I'll see you later. And that was basically how we got our first shipping line to say yes. And then it turns out they make a lot more money shipping through us than they do an intermediary anyway. So now they like us, but. And I've seen him since, and he doesn't want to kill me, which is great. So a win, basically.
Any other interesting things that definitely cannot scale that you had to do in the early days, especially from a marketing and sales standpoint? Because I think that's always a struggle, right? Lead generation, getting more traffic.
Yeah, I think. Well, so first off, you have basically started it, kind of got it kickstarted like a two-sided marketplace almost. So we went to the shipping lines and we had to just make them understand that we weren't going to try and be another broker and take away their customers from them. That was number one. So that was a really difficult process, and we needed the supply side to come to us because we're a tiny little startup and we can't afford. You raise $3 million, it's a lot of money, but at the same time, if you have to fly over the world to do hand-to-hand combat with old shipping guys, that's not going to work out for you. That's like a certain loss. And so what we did was we copied the logo and color palette of a freight forwarder. Kuehne + Nagel, the largest freight forwarder in the world. And it was just a complete ripoff. The logo itself is so ugly that they didn't even complain about it, but the original logo. So we put that on a website, and everybody thought we were backed by Kuehne + Nagel, and so they started coming to us and asking us to be on the platform and stuff. So that was the first hack, because we just couldn't afford to go around the world and do that. And so that worked out really well, which is great. We got there's 1,000 forwarders or something like that wanted to participate in the marketplace, and a couple of the major shipping lines. And then on the demand side, yeah, the demand side was brutal. So Renee, one of the founders, Renee DiResta, she's pretty incredible. She's a far more impressive person than I am. You should have her on next time. She's incredible. Yeah. Definitely on the hardware side. Literally wrote the book on hardware supply chain. So if any of you guys are IoT people, you should check out her stuff. But so she went out and was basically, we're like, hey, we need you to do biz dev because I have to fly all over the world and deal with these shipping line guys. And so she went out and just, shotgun, right? You figure out who your market is. You go and talk to literally everybody. Does this interest you? Is this interesting? Can you put through a transaction? So we started getting, transactions. In March of 15, we launched March of 15 with one customer, and that was who she brought to us. It wasn't anyone that we got on our own. And the thing went nowhere. It looked super sexy. It had the look of everything the industry had always wanted, and they'd always told us about, and we're doing all the product work. And then we realized the trick based on watching their behavior and asking the customers. And then that started referrals, honestly. So that got the referral engine going. We had one salesperson. I mean, we started early on. We started hiring salespeople way too far ahead of time. We had 4 or 5 salespeople here in Singapore that we'd hire from the industry, from freight and freight forwarding, but we weren't selling a freight forwarding service. So it was really a mismatch. It wasn't good for their career. It wasn't good for us. It was just like not a good situation. And so we ended up turning over that entire staff, I'm sad to say, and all really nice people, really good, but we didn't know how to train them to sell our products, and we didn't know really how to sell our product, and so we had to learn all that stuff. And I think you just have to admit to yourself, like, you've got to learn it really well and be able to pitch it and sell it and get referrals. And once you start getting referrals, that engine starts going. And so that was the big thing. Once we got referrals and we saw how people were using the platform, these commodity trading firms like kind of started signing up. Our close cycle on those big guys was like anywhere from 5 to 9 weeks. So it was a really quick turnaround, and we did that with basically one sales guy and me, and so it was roughly just all referrals. And so once we started seeing the referrals coming in, and we started seeing that we could, decrease. There's a concept called the sales learning curve. Once we decrease the cost of training to that sales learning curve, it's a machine. And right now we can hire a lot of salespeople, and they can be effective in market very quickly. And that's really what you're trying to get to when you get to scale.
So let's talk mistakes then. So that was right. You hired too early. Ended up correcting that mistake. What are some other big ones that you made in the early days? I think it's one of those funny things. I don't really regret anything. Like, you can make mistakes on the product side, and it's basically just like fix it, right? And also because my product background, I'm just kind of naturally inclined to being wrong a lot, and then just wanting to be corrected. When it comes to hiring, the thing I didn't commit to is like core values and principles of the company. Like, I am very direct now throughout the entire hiring process, and we're very honest as a company with candidates, and we're a lot faster and a lot just more direct, like I said. And that was the biggest thing. I think we hired people. There were certain people that we hired which were great at their individual jobs, but were not a good fit for the company. We are a really aggressive team. We're really smart. None of us has any sort of strong feelings loosely held, I think is the quote. And that's very much the company. And so we needed to do a better job at just hiring those people. And so we had a lot of turnover early on, which I definitely regret in the things that caused that turnover. We just weren't honest with ourselves, and so do you think
changed.
Some of the biggest mistakes were hiring mistakes in the early days?
Yeah, I mean, when you're a small company, you've got like type 1 and type 2 problems. Type 2 problems you can change and fix and sort out. Type 1 problems are things that either alter your company forever. Yeah. And I think the hiring can lead to that. Yeah. So early on, now it's great. I mean, now the team's just unreal, and now it's just about adding to this great core base, and so that's where we are now.
All right. So I've got one more question, and then we'll turn it over to everyone's questions. I think the interesting thing about where you're at right now with you've got funding in the bank, you're scaling out, global teams. I think it's easy to ask what the best part about being a startup CEO is, because we read about it every day, how great it is, right? But I think what's the biggest challenge on a day-to-day basis that at this particular stage that you face?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of this common
other than
theme.
sleep, other than no sleep,
Yeah, the sleep thing is a bit of a challenge, honestly. But I think the biggest challenge is making sure it really comes back to recruiting. It's so funny how, like, one of my investors and I were talking about this the other day. We were saying, we were kind of choosing between two really great candidates, and it's one of these things that becomes a problem that you stress out over, and then you have to step back and think, wait a second, these are both amazing people. Like, the fact that we're even talking to such great people is kind of a thing, right? It's great. So I think recruiting is always kind of the thing for me. We hired a head of people pretty early on, just recently, and she's been amazing just to like solidify the process. I think that's been really, really, really important, and also is just like smarter than us. The other thing that happens at a company at about this stage is you go through basically growing pains. It's like if you're a 13-year-old and you just start to like grow in different areas, and you're like, what are these new limbs that I'm dealing with? This is really uncomfortable. That's basically the stage of the company that we're in. We're kind of coming out of, right? And so the challenges are one of how do you communicate across the organization and those types of challenges on a daily basis. The most fun aspect for me of being a startup CEO is 100% not fundraising announcements. I hate them so much. I loathe them. But in fact, I'd rather never tell any of you anything about my fundraising situation. I'm really private about that kind of stuff. But the thing that's really great is when you're sitting around a meeting and you're kind of like, I wonder if I would get hired here if I interviewed with these people. They're all a lot smarter than I am. And then you also realize that you get to work with these great people, but that they now own your product. So you had an idea, and you got to a stage where customers started doing whatever they wanted with the product, which is 100% not what you intended for them to do with the product. You're like, why would you do that? It's crazy. But then it turns out, no, you're brilliant. You're using our product the right way. We're idiots, right? It's like one of those things. And then you also realize the employees take on the product and they make it their own. And they take on the company and they make it their own. And that's really exciting to see. It's exciting to see something where you like walk in and there's like an email message that goes out to a customer and you're like, that's a brilliant way of handling that situation. I never would have done that. It's a good thing I hired you. And so that's the most fun for me of being a startup CEO. And it's not something I predicted because I never had that experience before.
On that note, questions. If you could state your name, where you're from, not country, but maybe company or what you're doing in general, that'd be great. I think we'll pass around. We're going to pass around the mic? Okay. Sean will pass the mic.
Hi, my name's Ben Ravillis. I'm not saying where I'm from. Okay, I've flown all the way from Leicester.
Okay, all right, all right, fine. If you flew in
from Leicester,
yeah, that's right.
Oh, congratulations!
Welcome,
on last year.
Brutal. Not so good this year.
No.
So I wanted to ask about you personally, and how did you get here? What were you doing before, and at what point did you become an entrepreneur, and what changed?
Sure. All right, so I'm going to go through this really quick. I was 16. I was scrubbing meat, or 15. 14 or 15, actually. I was illegally scrubbing. That's really what it was. I was 14. I was illegally working in the U.S., scrubbing meat trays in a packing facility so that I could save up money to buy a computer, my first computer. I'd always really liked them, and I saw, like when I was 12, I installed the amber screen terminals at my company, my school, and was just like obsessed with the internet from like get-go. And so I was scrubbing meat trays, bought a computer, taught myself how to code, got a job writing Canon's first website, like one of Canon's first websites and Caterpillar's first websites in the U.S. And when I was like 16, and I just kept doing it. I stayed in school, stayed in high school, made a bunch of money, got really heady. I was like, I'm gonna go to art school. I'm just like gonna quit this whole programming thing. This is BS. I'm gonna go to art school because I'm amazing. And it turns out I was a terrible artist, absolutely terrible artist. Had no business being in art school. Dropped out of art school after like 3 months. Joined a startup called Starbelly.com. It was acquired for $250-ish million. And then was going to go back to school, got into UFC in Chicago for economics because I became obsessed with economics, kind of like art school where I was obsessed with it for like a week and a half and got into a thing. And then anyway, so once I didn't go to that school either, I was hired by a small French brokerage firm called Car Futures. And I was hired as one of their first software engineers to write programmatic trading software development. So this actually has implications on Haven too. From 2000 to 2003-ish, all of the data that was previously only available in the minds of traders became available in real time for machines to do negotiations. Bilateral negotiations went to multilateral negotiations within a very short period of time. And then you get things like Flash Boys and Bats and like all these things that were developed over that period of time. And so I was writing algo trading software from like 2000 to 2006. I was at the bank, ran data and architecture. So like for Goldman Sachs and like all these guys would use that software. And I had a pension at like 26. It was super awesome. I'm not going to lie. I'm not even going to pretend like I feel guilty about it. It was amazing. And then I moved to San Francisco with my now wife, and at the time girlfriend, and just to kind of get away from it all, and started working in ad tech because ad tech was going through the same problem. In advertising, Uyala's in here in the building, right? In advertising, all this data that was previously only available to guys in like bow ties that did TV buys was now available in real time on ad exchanges. And so you could use the same sort of math in order to dynamically acquire the right ad for this person at that point in time. Or at least that's the pitch, but in reality it's like 60% fraud, right? So we have to kind of temper that a little bit. So I was in ad tech for 8 years, 2 different startups there, ran product at the last startup, which was like a machine learning startup, but it was always about using data to trade. And so, sorry, long story long, I finally went to Haven because I was like, I am sick of strip mining the internet because I love the internet, and the internet gave me the last 16 years of my life. Why am I strip mining it to do advertising? Again, sorry to all the ULA people in the room, sorry. And I had to like get away, went to ship a truck to South America to drive the Pan American Highway. I raced cars growing up, and my wife was like, you want to do what with your son? All right, whatever. So we'd sold the last company, and so I went about doing this. And it was a disaster. And I'm from a trucking family, and I was like, why does this still work like it worked when I was a little kid, filling out commercial invoices on my dad's lap in like a truck in the middle of Illinois. And I was like, somebody needs to do something about this. And I became obsessed with the industry, never took the trip to South America. Talked to my co-founder, Jeff Weiner, who was in Apple and supply chain, and he was like, yeah, it's a massive problem. And it's funny, to him, he looked at it and he said, Apple spends up 1 million humans working on factory floors in Guangzhou every single time they do an iPhone release. And 1 million people are literally waiting on 3 containers that got rolled in Shanghai because somebody didn't know how to negotiate properly or someone didn't fill out the right paperwork. And so now you've halted $4.5 million of goods in each container. The company has $190 billion in cash in the bank, and they still couldn't get 3 boxes from wherever to Guangzhou in time to start the iPhone launch. And so we said, we need to fix all of this. I'm not going to South America. We need to fix this problem. And that's how Haven got started. That's the legit reason. So there you go. There's the background.
Awesome.
It's Mike Davey from DataStreamX. Regarding the HR, we spoke a lot about this, and you talked about hiring top talent and that. How did you go about approaching, in the earlier days, the right people? You said you went hire from the top first. Were you using recruiters? Were you using job banks? Or were you just like going after people and trying to poach as much as you could?
It was like a lot of LinkedIn stalking. A lot of LinkedIn stalking, industry stalking. So how did it work? So, it's funny looking back. I don't really think about it too much, but I guess looking back, Jeff and I knew one another. Renee and I knew one another, and or had met during the process of raising the capital. And so we had some people that we knew. One guy, our first engineer, we found him off of Craigslist, or he found us off of Craigslist, I guess. He had just packed up his bag, quit RIM, moved to California. His first week in California, he came and interviewed with us. I was like, wow, you're actually a really good software engineer. Yeah, done. You're hired. And so that's basically how that worked. And then the rest of the time, it was just meeting people in the industry. So the woman that runs our office here in Singapore is, one, just brilliant, just a ton of fun to work with. And one of the few people that we've ever met, and still to this day, I'd rather be lucky than good. She had been 11 years a string manager for Maersk Line. And so she knew the industry cold. And we got an intro to her because we were stalking this other woman that we wanted to hire as our head of the office. And she was leaving for Europe. She just got married. And she said, you should talk to my friend. And then it turns out her friend was Fawn. And Fawn was so perfect for us because she had all this industry experience, but she'd been at a startup here in Singapore for a couple of years and opening up their Cambodia location. And so she already was untrained from the industry, which is good. And so she's really scrappy. And we got really lucky. And so once we had her on board, we basically just said, okay, well, you know more about this than we do. Tell us what do we need to do to make X, Y, and Z happen. And then you kind of let those people, to some degree, take over, right? I mean, that's kind of how that works. But yeah, it was a lot of just say yes to everything early on in a startup and just meet as many people as possible. Because you're going to meet someone where you're just like, oh my God, they're brilliant, but I don't know what they can do for me. Well, it turns out you're all utility players in the first 20 people anyways. And so that's kind of how we treated it. But no, we didn't use recruiters. Yeah. We used a recruiter for a designer recently because it was an exec recruiter position. But otherwise we hired our own in-house now. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Abbas, and I'm from the muru-D's second cohort. I would like to check, you kept mentioning that freight forwarders are not a good fit for you, salespeople from freight forwarding industry, that's one. And which means that how do you differentiate yourself from not being a freight forwarder?
No, I said we specifically aren't hiring any longer from the freight forwarding industry. So we hired a couple, I think, so we happen to have been very lucky. We've got 2 people that are on staff that are from the forwarding industry, or 3 people, I guess. And one on the operations side, I think it's really straightforward because you need to make sure that nothing goes wrong. If we screw up, somebody doesn't get rice flour in Indonesia and tell Indonesians they're not going to have noodles tomorrow, there'll be a revolt, right? So we need to make sure that we're fulfilling that properly. But when it comes to sales side, I think a lot of startups go out and hire for Rolodexes. And that's wrong. Never hire for Rolodex. Hire incredibly intelligent, talented people. This is a massive learning for me. Hire incredibly intelligent, people that are really aggressive and can make the market, and instead of hiring for Rolodex. And I think early on we were hiring for too many Rolodexes, so we stopped doing that. So it's not so much about freight forwarders, it's just about freight forwarding is a service-based business, and Haven is inherently a product-based business that gets licensed to customers. And so there's not a lot of overlap in those sales cycles, and it's really hard to untrain people that are really excellent people at selling freight and logistics services. It's a really difficult problem. So that's what.
Thanks. I think we've got one over here.
Hi, I'm Kelvin from CQG. And wanted to find out, wouldn't it be easier to get funding from an anchor customer initially?
Oh man, how do I answer this without upsetting at least one or two people in the audience? I guess that's never possible, right? So here's the thing. I don't take strategic money. And if you're strategic corp dev and you contact me over email, I will very politely tell you no thank you. And I will not help you with your diligence on some other company. And so the reason we don't do it from an anchor company is because Haven is a neutral third party. That's the biggest differentiator, right? Haven is completely honest and transparent. We don't arbitrage anything. So that means that if a carrier quotes you through our platform, it's just like getting a quote through email. We do not modify that. And so it's very important that no one on our cap table can see the interests or see the underlying financials that leads to our marketplace. I don't let any of them on our cap table. And so that's why. So a strategic investor for Haven is like CSC Upshot or Temasek or someone like that, right? So it's a little bit different for us. But we don't allow any of the shipping lines to invest, any freight forwarders, any commodity trading firms. We don't allow any of it. If you're trying to bootstrap a startup, it basically reduces your TAM. And if you're one of the reasons that, and this is like, I can go on for hours about this, so let me just shorten it a bit by saying one of the things that I've seen it do is prevent a company from growing as much as it could have in a particular space. And it's basically like pre-selling your company to a strategic investor. And now in order to make a market, if you ever have to sell your company in like a down round situation, if you have to like short sell your company, now you're literally trying to make a market where one of the participants of the market already owns a portion of your company. And so I never want to be in a position of that kind of anti-leverage. It happened a lot in our industry. One of the reasons Haven can come into this industry is because the industry got together, but unfortunately not all the industry, of course, because they're really competitive, got together and funded another company like 15 years ago. And that company still has a hard time getting past the fact that its cap table looks like a hacked up mess of strategic investors. And I am protective as hell of the Haven cap table.
Yep. All right, we've got one down here. Neil?
Yeah, there's a guy back there too.
Yeah, hi, Neil Johnson. I'm with TNets, Singapore's largest customs business, if anybody needs anything moving across borders. And I also work with Bolero, which is a 16-year-old startup in the digitization of supply chain space. Quick question. I'll apologize in advance if I missed this when I just popped out to unlock the door downstairs, but I'm just trying to understand the kind of the space that you came into. Is that enabling shippers to procure freight smarter, or are you also in the execution space? So you enable cutting of an airway bill, cutting of a bill of lading, for example?
Yeah, so, okay, great. So this is going to be super niche for those of you in the audience that don't care about the freight and logistics space. But basically, let me just set up that. If I can, I'll just set that up a little bit for everybody else so they understand kind of how I'm going to answer. So in the logistics industry, there is the supply side. So think people that own massive ships. That means they take a bunch of bond debt from banks in order to buy big ships, right? NOL was one famously that was just sold by Singapore. And then you've got a bunch of middlemen. And the middlemen are roughly called freight forwarders and VOCCs. There's a couple of terms for them, but basically they arbitrage. And then there are a number of service providers that serve into those middlemen or serve directly to what we call the shipper anecdotally in this conversation. In reality, it may be a manufacturer, it may be a supplier for for the commodity trade. It could be any number of participants. And so what he's asking about is there's a variety of commercial documents that get created as part of the clearing function on every transaction. So the first part is the word freight. And freight basically is a synonym for rate. It's like if you go get a flight, you've got a rate. And then there's the clearing, which is the execution and the confirmation of that rate. So what Haven does is we provide basically a software solution for our customers, which happen to be shippers, some of the largest shippers in the world, as it turns out. And this software package allows them to become effectively their own logistics provider, their own freight forwarder. So there is a marketplace dynamic function to the system that effectively allows them to create their own bidded auction for their business on every single transaction. So it'd be like tendering a lot of companies at once on a real-time basis. And the companies that come back are going to be the potentially freight forwarders, other logistics providers. Doesn't really matter to us. It's whoever that customer typically uses or would like to use in the future. And then there are other various service providers such as cross-border trucking services, customs agents, things like that, clearinghouses, and LME warehouses, any number of kind of functions. And those can all be added as part of this bidded auction. So it's not just for the freight rate, but it's also for all of your downstream ancillary services. And then what happens with the rest of the documentation is the customer uploads all of their information, and that gets cleared. It comes as an email notification from Haven down to the supplier. And so the suppliers are all on the same page with regards to if a BL needs to be cut and things like that. But almost all of our customers use what's the official BL, which is the carrier bill of lading. That gets uploaded into the system. All the modifications are made in the system. And this is basically, think of this effectively like Dropbox, only specifically made for freight and logistics. It looks effectively just like Dropbox. And so all of that happens within the system, and so that way the customs agent can log in and kind of see that the commercial invoice and things like that, shipping instructions, commercial invoice, and any other sort of files that are required by law. So MSDS file for hazmat and things like that. So if you are a provider of one of these types of services, we would love to offer you to the customers that aren't already working with you. And also, if you're already working with one of our customers, then we may give you a call at some point in time. But all that happens directly in the system. And that clearing facility is really done between the customer and their providers. It's not really between Haven and the providers. However, with one last piece, and this is a really important piece of information for anyone that ever says, I want to create a startup, I'm going to make really valuable data and sell it to people for money. One, no, you're not. It's not going to happen. Hedge funds don't actually care because I used to buy that data. But two, is if your data doesn't come from the transaction itself, a monetary transaction itself, there is very little value to your data. And so when we talk about the shipping and logistics industry, we want to be able to give our customers back data instead of trading against them. And that means capturing 100% of that stream. And the way that we do that is we provide factored financing to our shipper, to our customer, the person shipping the goods. We give them net payment terms. And then on the back end, we pay the provider right away. Unless, of course, the provider has given us net payment terms. So we sit on the full transaction from a cost standpoint, from an AR risk standpoint, but we do not sit on the bill of lading ever. We never end up on the commercial document of a transaction. And so bill, LC shipments wouldn't work if Haven was like on the bill of lading. We don't want to do that. Plus, we would be legally a freight forwarder at that point, right? And we want to stay away from it. So yeah, that's a good question. We can talk about that later too if you like. Okay. I sense it. I sense he wants to talk about more.
I think you saw one more back here, right? There.
Hi, I'm Felix from Engage. Were you ever, when you started Haven, at a point where you had some moral questions? For example, if you were to be involved in shipping something like weapons, or if you ever had clients in a way where you're like, nah, that is, and if yes, at one point did you say my moral standards have more value than more money?
Yeah, I mean, I think you need to think about, well, it's not like you need to think about it ahead of time. That stuff's going to come up in this industry. And so the way that we handle it's very simple. Like, I mean, Haven has a pretty interesting attitude. The name itself, the reason the name Haven, it literally means a safe harbor, a safe place to trade. And so that's kind of where the brand name came from. And when we thought about this type of thing, and it came up a couple times, when we thought about it, we said our goal is to reduce the corruption in the supply chain, so much so that you can get more food to more people you can get more products to more people faster, cheaper, more yet even in a more profitable way, right? So we want the most honest way of conducting trade to be the most profitable. We're working with very large commodity trading firms, right? And so we know that these people they want to sell at the best price for their buyers. They are investor driven. They're dollar driven, and if they're really effective, it lowers the volatility. In all honesty, a lot of brokers do, so long as they clear through the same platform. So we've always viewed our moral opportunity as we want to help them trade better and faster, so that they can reduce their exposure on a given trade, and then they can afford to sell more sustainable products at the exact same rate. And so if you lower the freight cost per box just by a couple bucks, like I think it's like $20 or $30 on a palm oil trade as an example, you can get away from salt the earth palm oil trading, and you can start selling ISO tanks of sustainable palm. And it's not like I'm trying to get the industry to do that. The industry is already going in that direction, right? There's all these initiatives about it. And so we really want to try and enable those trades to be profitable right away, so they can eventually lead to that. So our attitude's always been, how can we help streamline that trade? We don't do any weapon stuff. The U.S. government has looked at us for a couple of things, which would be a tricky kind of business. It's just we don't know it really well, and we don't really understand the dynamics there. I'm probably not very good at it, so we haven't started doing any of that kind of thing. But commodity trade in itself, and food production as well. Commodity and food for us personally. I mean, I grew up in the middle of cornfields in Illinois, so like I was surrounded by commodities from get-go, and I just always thought like food and commodities are really important things. So our moral compass was like, let's help those things be better for people, right? And that's kind of led to the values around what we say yes and no to. We definitely always say no to small startups that are kickstarted, not because they're not good or because they're immoral, but just because we can't handle them. So we'd like to say sorry to anyone that goes and tries to sign up and is rejected. But that's not a moral thing, I promise. It's just we're not very good at servicing you. That's separate.
Cool. We got time for one more question, and then but Matt will stick around. So if you want to dig into things later. Yeah, Dexter.
Hi, Matt. This is Dexter from UOB. Just wanted to ask more to understand what's the thinking for Haven moving forward. Are you gonna focus on maybe like upselling your current customers, or entering new markets, or developing new products for them?
Yeah, so I think we definitely are more of a product-oriented organization. So we've got a lot of new products that we think are really interesting. They're going to help our customers trade. Right? If you think about brokering as a concept, we want to destroy the concept of brokering freight. It's not like we want to be a better freight forwarder. We just want to destroy the concept of forwarding longer term. And that really comes to building new products that help our customers take advantage of data instead of taking advantage of our customer via data. And so we've got a bunch of new products that are going to come out around that. That we're really excited about. So those will be kind of like new offerings that are just a little bit different than the market offering that we have right now, and the collaborative booking features that we have now. So I'd say that's number one. Number two is, and by the way, thanks everyone for not asking me if we're looking to like sell or go IPO. I get that question all the time, and thank you all for not asking that question. It's a foolish question. Don't you dare. The VC quickly raises his hand. No, wait. What are you going to do? And we're not going to do either one of them. We're going to become massively profitable and own the industry. That's always the answer to that. So I think so in our future, like that's kind of how we think about our future. That's our compass. The other thing is I may need to talk to you. I mean, we may need some AR lines here in Singapore pretty quickly. We grew a lot faster than we expected to this month. So I'll hit up UAB afterwards. Pitch you on a line of credit.
All right, awesome. Well, thanks, Matt, for coming in. You're flying out a couple of days, or?
Thanks for having me. No, I mean I'm here until Saturday.
Okay. Wow, yeah. That's a big chunk of time.
I know.
Right?
Yeah. A full 4 or 5 days for me.
Wow.
It's great.
Right.
I'm gonna relax. I might get an extra 4 hours of sleep or something.
Hey, you deserve it. So
Thank you very much.